It's Viking-Packer week, one of the best 2 weeks of the season, aside from the other Viking-Packer week. Here with Locked On Packers on Crossover Thursday, Locked On Vikings, Locked On Packers podcasts.
Ooh-wee! You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? I am Luke Braun of the Locked On Vikings podcast, here with Peter Bukowski of the Locked On Packers podcast. We're crossing over here, as we will do every Thursday. Vikings-Packers playing each other. Week 1 season opener. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com. Promo code Locked On. Again, I am Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL, and you can find Peter Bukowski at Peter Bukowski on Twitter. Peter, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited for week 1. It's a little surreal that we're finally here. I feel like normally we spend more time talking about week 1's opponent, and for whatever reason we haven't. I don't know if you feel that way, but that's just sort of where I am. And I think the reason is there's a lot going on in Green Bay land, a lot of Cheesehead Nation stuff that we have to worry about. So I think that's one of the reasons.
It's been weird because it's very internal right now. Yeah. With the Vikings. We're all learning this new coach and his scheme and what's the culture like. And it's all and I guess we have a week 1 game, but who we actually are playing. I remember last year, I spent 2 months talking to the Locked On Bengals guys. And because the week 1 was Vikings Bengals. And we spent forever on that one. But it's been a lot more. We kind of got our own thing going on over here.
Well, you have the new coaching staff and the Packers have offensive line questions. They've got receiver questions, a new defense not a new defense, but new players. So there's a lot of stuff to dig into here. Let's talk about this coaching thing, because to me, that seems like the biggest story. To you, is that the biggest story, what this offense and defense is going to look like?
It's been the thing the whole season. Yeah, that's been the thing the whole season. It's that the culture is a lot different. The Mike Zimmer culture totally fell apart. Everybody was on eggshells with each other. People were not on speaking terms. Multiple people, like Kirk Cousins and Rick Spielman, not on speaking terms with Mike Zimmer at the end. Real bad stuff. That has been purged. And now you've got these laid back youngins with Adolfo Mensa and Kevin O'Connell. We got the millennial vibes here, and everybody's all kumbaya, work together and everything like that. But beyond that, it's been a new scheme. It's going to be a much different look. I think in previous, last couple years, you and I would talk and we say, we run about the same scheme and we still are from the same tree. It's still a McVay guy, and LaFleur was a McVay guy, and it all comes from Mike Shanahan up top. But it's going to be a little bit more like the way the Rams run it and a little bit less like the way the Packers run it. And that will be different. You're going to see a little bit more, I think a little bit more drop back passing, more passing volume in general. It's going to be less of a ground and pound and Dalvin Cook kind of offense. That's at least what we've been led to believe. And then defensively, it's totally different. We picked up, again, a couple of former Packer coaches, so you guys probably know it better than I do. Mike Pettin is a consultant. He's assistant head coach, but he's not the defensive coordinator. It's Ed Donatel, who is a protege of Vic Fangio. So this is going to be like what we saw with the Bears in this division a few years ago with Fangio and that quarter, half, those sort of rotating safeties, that defense that we saw for so long there and then saw for so long in Denver. They're running that pretty much right off the book. So that's, I guess, as short as I can get in what's different here in Minnesota. The short answer is all of the things they're doing, not many of the people. The offensive personnel is more or less the same. They changed right guard and everything else is running back. Defense, there's a lot of turnover because guys got old and they got younger players and stuff, but we can get into that in a bit. Here's the thing, Peter. We got to talk about, because I think this might be the biggest story for both of our teams outside of the season scope stuff. This Za'Darius Smith revenge game thing feels like it's the moment that's the thing of the moment for both of our teams. Like Zadarius Smith wants to stick it to the Packers. It is not one of those like, oh, it's like it'll be fun to get back at him, and I can't wait to see all my old. No, he is like upset, and he wants to like prove a point.
Yes.
So what do you make of all that? Update me on this because I missed like 90% of this drama when it was all happening in Green Bay. I feel like an outsider.
This started last summer, and I was on Twitter and on my show talking about how it's worse than it seems. And it started with just Matt LaFleur being coy about why Za'Darius wasn't at camp. And then I started to hear some whispers about dissension, about Za'Darius isolating himself from the team, about him popping off at coaches, about some disagreements internally. Some anecdotes that I kind of don't even want to get into because they're so out there. He was mad about not being voted captain, and
Right.
then gets season-ending back surgery. Goes out and plays week 1, has a back injury, but then goes out and plays, and then has the surgery and is released mostly to save money. He wanted a new deal. I think
Hmm.
that if he hadn't had back surgery, he probably would have gotten a new deal at the end
For
of the
sure.
year. But they made the decision to move with Preston Smith. If I'd have told you at the end of the 2020 season that they were going to keep Preston Smith and not Zadarius Smith, you'd have said you're absolutely nuts. This got bad,
I think I
and
did.
I Packer fans, some of them, the people that don't want to hear the truth in a lot of cases, got mad at me and said, "Well, you're just stirring the pot. You're just trying to, create some drama where there isn't any." Oh, no, no. I was not guessing when I said that this had gotten sour. And this was the quote from Zadarius Smith to Ty Dunn and go long. That's why I felt the way I did with Green Bay. I gave that SH expletive my all. I put my blood, sweat. I put my back on the effing line. I put everything. And that year 3, I was treated bad. That's why I'm here now, so I can play them twice a year. Now, let's put aside the fact that he signed with Baltimore first in the tampering period and then went to Minnesota. I don't know if it's
Right.
because
That was
this
a money thing.
this changed or what the situation was.
They like tried to change the contract at the last second. He didn't like it.
Yes. And
That's
so
what I
things got weird. He backed out and decided, well, if I can go try and tackle Aaron Rodgers twice a year, then that's great. So there's a little revisionist history in there, but the reality is not only is this a big deal that he's pissed, the offensive line is the biggest question mark for the Packers right now because we don't know if David Bakhtiari is going to be able
Yeah.
to play. We don't know if Elton Jenkins is going to be able to play. Elton Jenkins has been doing teamwork. Um, David Bakhtiari this week started doing some teamwork, although he was listed as limited in Wednesday's practice, which usually means not doing teamwork, but it could have been walkthrough stuff and not full go stuff. You never quite know what these designations
Yeah.
mean. Matt LaFleur said he
Well,
already knows who's
how
going to be the
hard was this
starting 5.
practice? Yeah.
So it's not a matter of testing these guys to see how their body reacts. They're either ready or they're not. Matt LaFleur knows if they are. We don't. And so
Mhm.
if it's Yash Nyman, who's like a fine backup tackle, he's probably a really good backup tackle and potentially an adequate starter. And then question mark at right tackle. We don't actually know who it would be. Is it going to be Royce Newman at right tackle with Jake Hansen at right guard? Is it going to be the rookie Zach Tom at right tackle with Royce Newman at right guard? Could it be Royce Newman at right guard and Zach Tom at right tackle? We don't know. We know it's going to be a group
Wow.
that has never played together if those guys can't go. If there's one and not the other, it gets a little easier because like if Elton Jenkins can play and David Bakhtiari can't, Nyman's going to be the guy. If Bakhtiari can't play and Elton Jenkins can't, then that's where it gets a little weird. It's the right side that's got some questions right now. And guess what? Whoever's out there is going to have to block a really, really, really pissed off Zadarius Smith. And we saw in 2019 and 2020, like in the Seahawks game, we had the snub jersey shirt under the jersey. Like this guy holds a grudge and he plays like it. So this is like not just the story, it is the matchup
Yeah.
for this game. And we're gonna have time to get into the matchups in a second.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. That just becomes my key matchup, which is what we're going to talk about next, and then we'll do some score predictions at the end. But first, we got to talk about some of the key matchups, and I also want to talk about some stuff elsewhere, especially on the outsides, where some really, really interesting stuff will happen. But first things first, I want to talk to you about Turo. Turo is the world's largest car sharing marketplace. You can book any car you want wherever you want it, browse a huge selections, anything from a big old SUV or a classic or luxury car, and you can find even affordable economy cars if you're on a budget. You can even use Turo to test drive a new electric vehicle, and Turo hosts can even deliver the car right to you. So ditch boring rental cars and find your drive at Turo.com.
All right, we're back here. Crossover Thursday. Peter Bukowski from Locked On Packers, Luke Braun from Locked On Vikings. And let's do the fun part, the matchups. What is actually going to happen on the field? Luke, when you look at this Packers team, very similar offensively and defensively to the one from last season, much like the Vikings in terms of personnel, except one big difference, and that's Devontae Adams. When you look at the way that these two teams match up this year, what stands out to you?
Well, those are the two, and they're both on the Packers offense, Vikings defense side of the ball are the ones that really stick out. William Justin Jefferson and Jair Alexander probably will have some good tussles. That'll be fun. But really, it's on the other side of the ball that I think this game gets decided. Where the Vikings have Cameron Dantzler, who looks great in camp. He looks like he took a step forward. Not the first time he's looked good in camp, and that time he didn't have a good season. So there's a bit. We'll call that a question mark. We'll call that a maybe. We don't know. And then we have Patrick Peterson. We don't know what we get out of him, but you're not exactly going to have him like shadow the number one all day. Like those days are long gone. So whatever you can get out of those two guys, it feels like that. Like if this whole thing falls apart, it's going to be on the outside, because on the inside with Za'Darius Smith, who's 100% raring to go, Danielle Hunter, 100% raring to go. Harrison Phillips has been spectacular in camp as a nose tackle, like eye popping, make you vomit spectacular. He's been he's just like kicking ass. And then Dalvin Tomlinson next to him as well, no slouch. That is a heck of a front. And those guys, they have basically shown nothing interesting blitz wise in the preseason. Why would you, right? They've done a couple of twists in a couple of games that are all super vanilla, and that's about it. Otherwise, it's been 4-man rush all the time. So I have no idea what kind of pressure packages they're going to bring, and neither do the Packers. And they haven't shown anything. They haven't shown it in camp. They have kept this close to the vest. So if you're going to, like you said, have an offensive line that might have rookies on it, guys who haven't played together, guys that don't have that chemistry, I feel like that gets really interesting, and that might be able to rescue something. Like, I'm really curious to see what happens when Alan Lazard is one-on-one with Cameron Dantzler. I have no idea what to make of that matchup, and I feel like that could be an advantage either way. And if it is, that's going to be really, really impactful.
I think too, Alan Lazard against Shannon Sullivan. If Sully is going to be in the slot because he's a smaller guy, Alan Lazard being able to use his frame in the middle of the field. Now, Alan Lazard, a question mark, did not practice on Wednesday. We got stepped on last week, so we'll see where he is.
He doesn't for week one.
He doesn't seem to be like in a lot of pain. He seems to be good running off to the side, but that becomes a question mark, right? So I was looking up these numbers because I think they're fascinating. Minnesota was 29th in pass rush win rate last season, which is a tongue twister. That's why I have to say it slowly every time I say it. But they were 9th in adjusted sack rate and 6th in pressure percentage.
That'll be Zimmer.
The pressure numbers from Pro Football Reference. That's Mike Zimmer designer blitzes.
Oh yeah, that's also not having
Mike Pettine's designer blitzes. That was like the only thing at the end in Green Bay that he was still good at. Is he could on third down dial up those things, and that is the Vic Fangio. Even though Vic didn't blitz as much as like Brandon Staley. When Brandon Staley was at the Rams, that one year where they were just glorious, it was very vanilla first and second, and on third we are going to tune your ass up. It's exotics, it's fire zones, it's wild, just like stunts, twists, 5-man pressures, all kinds, simulated pressures, all kinds of stuff just to get you corner blitzes. I'm fascinated to see what this Minnesota pressure package looks like, because I want to know if they can win one-on-one. Now, last year, no Danielle Hunter. That is a big problem for your win rate.
Mostly no Michael Pierce
and no Zadarius Smith.
Yeah.
Right. So if what I'm wanting to see is, do they think they need to blitz? Like, is this for the first quarter and a half them going, let's just see if some 4- and 5-man pressures on third down is enough, and then if you need to show some of these exotic blitzes that you've been holding close to the vest, go do it. The other part of this is Matt LaFleur has seen Mike Pettine's exotic blitz package. So, he can always be in the lab drawing up some new stuff, but there's some level of familiarity there as well.
For sure, but is this feels a lot more like it's Donatel's defense than it is Pettin's. I think Pettin's had like one media
Yeah.
appearance. He is very much a consultant. He's a we gave a friend a job kind of guy, I think. That's Kevin O'Connell giving an old coach his a job. Or an old colleague, I guess, because it was on the defensive side. But they knew each other from back when O'Connell was a backup quarterback for Mark Sanchez.
Well,
So
and Kevin
that
O'Connell
kind of
was on the
feels a little bit like
Browns
that.
team when Patton was head coach, right?
Right, that too, yeah. Um, so that feels a little bit like that. But and it's very much like way more Fangio influenced.
Mm.
So I have no idea. I think that's we're both going to be fascinated with that. Um, Real quick though, I think we can probably look to the other side of the ball. One of the big things that I just found out on here on like Wednesday morning, injury report came out for both teams. No Irv Smith on it. Irv Smith had
Yep.
torn a ligament in his thumb and missed the entire preseason. He is 100% full participation, no designation on the injury report. So he will be full go. We haven't seen him since he had an absolutely electric training camp in 2021, tore his meniscus out for the season. Um, so my question becomes like, Irv Smith is not going to be running any limited route tree. He is a tight end, but they will be able to run packages because of his speed and because of his route running. And because he's a pretty good blocker and he's a tight end as a blocker, they're going to be able to run their like four wide plays, just treating Irv Smith as one of those wide receivers. So my question becomes on your secondary, and I'm not familiar enough with it. I don't know who is best equipped to take that sort of move tight end type role. That's what Irv Smith is. He is not faster than any of the wideouts. 4.63. He runs like a tight end, but like a fast tight end. And he's big. Who keeps up with that? Whose job will that become on the Packers?
So I think the answer might be different on first and second down than it is on third down.
Okay.
I say that only because I think this is going to be a heavy, heavy, heavy man team on third down, and
Interesting.
so
Okay.
that means it's Quay Walker in all likelihood. I think on first and second
Rookie.
down, you'll see Quay Walker is the rookie linebacker, first round
Yeah.
pick out of Georgia, 6'4", sort of a Devondre Campbell clone physically. We'll see if he's the sort of processor that Campbell was, but he's also the guy who's more equipped athletically to move and run with tight ends. We saw him in the slot against Traylon Burks last year at Georgia, just like blanket him. Now Traylon Burks not the most natural separator, not the most sudden in and out of his breaks, but still that was one of the most dynamic receivers in college football last year, and Quay Walker handled that that responsibility. We haven't seen a ton from Quay in the preseason, so getting an understanding of what his role is going to be on this team. But Brian Gutekunst said when they drafted him, and Matt LaFleur has said, and Joe Barry has said, the Quay Walker pick was made with the idea that they can just live in nickel, and not the old Mike Pettin nickel, which was really dime with three safeties and one of them, reduced down into the box as a linebacker. No, true nickel. 4 guys at the line of scrimmage, 2 true defensive linemen, 2 edge players, and 2 legit off-ball linebackers with your extra corner. So I think this is still a Joe Barry scheme where you're going to play a lot of 2-man, but they're also going to play plenty of quarters, plenty of quarter half, and that means Russell Douglas underneath. That means if they split Irv Smith out, that means Eric Stokes. That means Jair Alexander. So it's going to be a lot of mix and match. What will be interesting is, let's say Irv Smith starts to just like go off. Then what do you do? Is it Darnell Savage time?
You start
Is
changing
it
things.
Russell Douglas time? They've shown a willingness to do that. They did it with Darnell Savage against Mark Andrews, and they just said, "You've got this guy." It didn't go great. Darnell Savage did not have his best year last year compared to what he was in 2020 and even 2019. But then he makes the game-winning play on a 2-point conversion and breaks up the pass. So I think the answer will change over the course of the day, depending on what the needs are for this Packers defense. So, I'm wondering too, defensively for the Packers, if that approach works. Can they stick in 6-man boxes against a team, even a team that wants to throw it more, when they do run? Can they live in that world against Dalvin Cook? Because that's a tough ask for anybody. But if they can, and they can play that 2 shell and they can play their nickel, that makes it a lot harder for Kirk Cousins to hit the shot plays down the field and to do the things that they want to do and be explosive in the passing game. So that's a big part of this game for both sides.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of Vikings Packers game in the past have come down to, can the Packers stop Dalvin Cook or not?
And the answer in a
Uh,
lot of cases has been no.
yeah, that's why they keep randomly splitting the series, regardless if it's the Vikings are good. Speaking of that, we got to do score predictions and wrap up a little bit. There's some other thoughts that I think we want to toss around. So let's get into score predictions next. Luke Braun at Luke Braun NFL, Locked On Vikings, talking to Peter Bukowski at Peter_Bukowski of the Locked On Packers podcast. You go first. What's your score prediction? Let's get it.
So I have 23-20 Packers right
Okay.
now. They are, I believe, I last looked, Bet Online has them as 1 point favorites. They had been 2, they've been 1.5.
1 point it's down to? It was at 3 when it first opened back in like May.
It opened at 3, and
My
I don't know.
goodness.
I think it's moved because of the uncertainty. I think there's been some Vikings hype.
There is some
In
Vikings
Packer
hype.
circles, the joke is that every year the offseason is just long enough for everyone to talk themselves into the Vikings competing with the Packers, and then the season comes around and everyone goes, "Well, why do we do that?"
We
And
got weird
so
Lions hype that way too. It's just long enough for everybody to go, maybe they can win 8 and get a 7
and
seed.
I think people were just sort of sick of doing it with the Vikings, and so they were like,
Yeah.
Lions."
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of the reason. I think this can be a close game. I think it's going to be a sort of like classic Packers Vikings slugfest. And I really just think the difference is going to be Aaron Rodgers. I think it's going to be continuity. But this is a Vikings team that is going to be scary all season. It's certainly a team that I think can be a playoff team if the defense coalesces the right way. I'm not sure I trust Ed Donatel to make sure that happens. But I like Kevin O'Connell. I was talking to Joe Thomas about him today because Joe was in Cleveland with him,
Yeah, yeah.
and said, there's actually a lot of similarities to Matt LaFleur. And
Sure.
so I think that's a cool thing. I'm really excited for this game. I'm excited for the next matchup with these two teams. This is the battle for the NFC North, and it could also be, if the Vikings want to try and steal the North, this is a must win, right? I mean,
Oh, for sure.
if you're going to win the division, you have to win this game.
For sure. Ross and I on Locked On NFL, we do Locked On NFL Tuesdays with Ross Jackson. We talked about this game as one of those that's like might have sneaky playoff implications. And if the Vikings can steal this game, then, and I say steal, but if they're 1 point dogs, I mean 1 point home underdogs still kind of feels. But to me, this has felt like so insurmountable because this is the first game of a new scheme, a new coach, new everything. People are still new to stuff. People are still making mistakes. People are still learning. It's never that hot. Like unless you have Aaron Rodgers just sort of winning games anyways, which is what happened in 2019.
Right.
There's always growing pains. And so I expect some growing pains. So I'm not nearly as bullish. I'm not very bullish on this Vikings team right now, and I'm okay with it. They've got a direction they're going for it, but it's going to be a bit of a transition. There's going to be sloppy things. They're going to lose games they probably shouldn't lose, and I'm like, I've already made my peace with that. But the defense, I think that it's going to take some time for them to really gel because there's younger players, players that haven't played together, players without that chemistry, and they're relying right now. Starting safety Cam Bynum, starting corner Cam Dantzler, Jordan Hicks hasn't played here, Harrison Phillips hasn't played here. Um, I'm excited about how all those players go, but I understand that's going to take a little time to gel. So I actually kind of think Aaron Rodgers is going to go off in this one. Um, I've been putting him in all my prize picks lineups. Take the more on Rodgers and everybody, even without Devontae Adams. I think Aaron Jones could go off in this one. Um, I'm going to go with something like a 31-20. I don't think this game is actually going to be close. 31-20 Packers. I think that 1 point line is insane. I think it's way too high on the Vikings. And I think there's a lot of hype surrounding Kevin O'Connell, and I think that's appropriate. Sure. We all get hyped on the new head coach and where he can take the team. But Rome wasn't built in a day, and that kind of thing doesn't just kick in immediately. The Vikings have sold us on this idea that like the toxicity of Mike Zimmer was really the only problem, and if we just get rid of that and get in a kumbaya guy, everything will just sort of work out and be hunky dory. And they have essentially behaved that way. Um, I need to see it to believe it, and honestly, up against the what top 3 defense in the league and Aaron Rodgers back to back MVP, this is not going to be the proving ground. You're probably going to end up just licking your wounds and walking away from this one, even at home, even with the opener, even with all the hype and everything. So if the Vikings can steal this and surprise me, I will be stoked. But I'm going 31-20. I think Aaron Rodgers can toss 3 touchdowns in this game and it's over by the third quarter.
So here's the caveat that I will add. I'm hedging a little bit because I'm with you. I think this line is it is too narrow a margin. If you look at things like ESPN FPI or Massey Peabody or some of the other point-based models, they have the Packers as like 5, even 6 points better than the Vikings on a neutral field. So like
Yeah.
1 is kind of silly. It probably should be like 4.5. But I don't know who's playing offensive line. If you told me
Fair enough.
Elton Jenkins and David Bakhtiari were going to play, it's funny, as you were saying this, I was formulating it in my head before you said your score. If I was like, okay, if I know Alan Lazard, David Bakhtiari, and Elton Jenkins were going to play, I would say 31-20. And then you said 31-20,
Yeah.
and I was just sort of like, okay, cool.
Yep.
I'm glad we're on the same page of this. But like, if they can't, if it is Yash Nyman and a conglomerate of guys on the right side, and then all of a sudden it's not Alan Lazard, it's Sammy Watkins, and Romeo Dobbs has to do real stuff, like that gets me a little bit more concerned. This is, to me, this comes down to if you can pass protect, the Packers are going to win. And I think that's going to be true pretty much every week.
Yeah.
Like if the Packers can protect Aaron
And
Rodgers.
for everybody always. Yeah.
Right. But Rodgers more than I would say like a Pat Mahomes or a Josh Allen, where you're just like, no, they'll figure it out because they can escape and they can do things with their legs that Rodgers just at this point in his career is not the same guy moving and creating. And he doesn't have the time under tension with these young receivers.
I was going to say the
scramble
rookies are not going
drills.
to have that
Right.
wavelength that like
Right.
Adams
And
had,
so,
or go back to like Jordy.
or like
Yeah.
you need to know what your hot is. You need to know like, hey, this is right now. It's on your body.
Yeah.
So that part of it is why I think like, yeah, if David Bakhtiari and Elton Jenkins are out there, like I have no problem thinking the Packers are going to do what they did at US Bank last year. But that's where I'm a little concerned here right now, just because of the uncertainty. I'm building that in. If you, I'm still taking the Packers on any money line. I'm still taking the Packers with the points, obviously, because it's only one. I've already put that bet in. So I mean, that's where we are on that one.
I put that in a month ago.
And so it is the kind of thing that I think the next matchup between these two teams will give us a better idea, to your point about the rust, of where these two teams are actually headed this season, right?
Yes. And that might not have great implications if the Vikings season goes belly up. Certainly could. And I wouldn't even be that upset about it because I understand that they've got a direction and they're marching toward it. But by the time we get to that game, that might not, but it will still be like a signal. This is one where I'm just kind of looking to stay in it and survive. And that's also just begrudging respect that I have for the Packers right now. They just look like they're going to be pretty good. And the Vikings have holes we're sort of hoping won't show up. But hey, Vikings are a lot healthier than the Packers, and sometimes that's all it takes. There's one guy on the injury report, and he's a rotational player. It's Jonathan Bullard. Everybody else is going to be a lot healthier. So that might end up being what it comes down to. We'll talk again, though, later in the season. So make sure you tune in for all of that stuff. Make sure you tune in to both Locked On Vikings and Locked On Packers. All right. We love a little cross-contamination on the Locked On Podcast Network. Scout the enemy. Come scout. Come listen to my show and make fun of me. All right. I'll hate it. You'd be really dunking on me. So we will both see you tomorrow. We'll see you all next week. For Peter Bukowski at Peter_Bukowski of Locked On Packers, I am Luke Braun at Luke Braun NFL of Locked On Vikings. Hey, make sure you check out the Ultimate Pro Football Preview because Peter and I spent some time dunking on the Bears and a little bit on the Lions as
poor
well.
Lauren Cox.
No sympathy. He knows what he did. All right, we will both see you all tomorrow on our respective shows. Peter, thank you so much for hanging out.
Always fun, Luke.